Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Lindy Jung. I am a science fiction and fantasy author, and I talk about writing, books, etc. on here, basically whatever I feel like. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about introducing character foils into your writing, basically going over what they are, how to utilize them, and some examples. This is something I think about a lot. Character is definitely a huge focus when it comes to my own writing, and naturally as a result, character foils do come into play. It's just something you want to consider for sure if you have any sort of like cast, any sort of protagonist antagonist balance to play with. It's a really interesting way to beef up that sort of conflict and to create conflict amongst different characters, play off of theme. There's just so many different ways you can use foils, and honestly they are such a useful tool. And even if you don't necessarily know what they are, you probably already are instinctively using some aspect of character foils in your narrative already. So that's what's really exciting about it. It's kind of one of the few things that are sort of intuitive when you're just sort of writing characters. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right. Part one is just sort of discussing what character foils are. In the most technical, cut and dry terms, a character foil is a character within the narrative that emphasizes certain key traits in a major character through traits of their own. Another good term to sort of simplify this concept, I guess, is to call them a reflection or a mirror image of the main character. This is not necessarily saying that they are a direct reflection, that they're a duplicate of the main character, but when you look at a mirror, what do you see? You tend to notice your flaws, you tend to notice specific traits. So it's bringing out that element through some form of reflection. And by highlighting certain traits in your main character, and it doesn't have to be just a main character, any major character can have a foil within the story, but by highlighting those traits, you are bringing to light maybe what's important within the greater narrative. Like, for example, if your theme tends to center around the main character's fatal flaw, then a foil character is a great way to bring that out, to really highlight that trait within that character so you're really getting your point across. Anyway, on to a quick example. So Train to Busan is like one of my favorite movies of all time. It's definitely my favorite Korean film. It is like my second favorite film ever after Everything Everywhere All at Once. But within that film, the main character is foiled by several other characters throughout the narrative, but one of the ones that really stuck out to me when I first watched it for class, and then just continues to stick out to me every time I watch it again, is there's this like greasy, weaselly businessman character who is like the closest thing you have to an antagonist outside of the actual zombies, and like, you know, it's you know, a man versus nature conflict almost, but this character is very much like an antagonistic force within the story. He's just the worst. Like, he sacrifices other people to save his own skin. He is turning people against the main characters. I honestly don't even remember 100%. It's been a while since I've seen it, but he's, you know, turning people against the main characters. He's doing all of these horrible, self-centered, selfishly motivated things in this time of crisis where people really need to be working together. You see this from the start, even before the zombies hit. Like, he is trying to get off the train first. He's trying to access, or, you know, use his connections to get to safety without thinking about other people. In this scene where he's making that phone call, trying to get himself to safety, you see the main character like also mirroring him, doing that, copying that, because he also has those resources. He's also sort of like wealthy, a businessman, and has the access, the connections to get out of here and his daughter out of there. And what we're seeing here is that this character, this foil, this greasy, like shitty businessman, is a reflection of the main character's worst trait. This is the trait he has to overcome. I can see my character or my camera like bouncing up and down as I gesticulate. This is the trait he has to overcome. This is the theme of the story, is that selfishness will basically get you nowhere. And over time, you see this in their arcs, which parallel each other. The main character becomes less selfish as he's trying to get himself, his daughter, and the people he's gained connections to survive the situation. And the businessman gets more selfish, and not to spoil it, but it does lead to his downfall ultimately. And although we end up seeing our main character sacrificing himself because of this businessman who fucks everything up by being a selfish bastard, you see that he does succeed in his goal, which is to save his daughter and get her to safety by being selfless, by committing the ultimate act of selflessness, which is self-sacrifice. So this creates an ideological conflict that plays off the theme, as well as this physical conflict that reoccurs between these two characters as they're both trying to survive this incident. And honestly, like, this dynamic is one of the reasons I love this movie so much, because it is so well done. It's wonderfully acted. Every beat just hits so hard, and culminating in that climactic scene, oh my gosh, it goes so hard, guys. You should watch that movie. So to recap, foils are characters that reflect and enhance and emphasize certain traits in a major character or the main character. And that's basically what we're going to be talking about moving forward. Part 2 is a little more jumbled, like my notes are definitely a little bit more jumbled, but I am going to talk about how to effectively use foils or how to enhance what you probably already have and make it just 1,000 times more effective. I mean, not 1,000 times, it's false advertising, but just to make it more effective so you can really get your point across with your story. So just talking about some things I've learned while, writing foil characters of my own, I think one of the main things to keep in mind when you're setting up this character is that they should not be like a one and done type of character, in my opinion. If you're going for the foil character and the main character's relationship or reflection of each other being representative of the theme, you definitely want there to be some meat to that character. Like, they should not exist just to do this. They should have their own arc. It could parallel the main character's arc. They should have stakes in the story, goals, etc., etc., etc. They should just not be some like random guy who pops up. I think it's really like a waste of a character, of good foil character, to just have it be some random dude who pops up and is kind of greedy when the main character is not greedy, or is greedy, a little bit greedy, but not necessarily as greedy. You know what I'm saying? And then they disappear. Like, you want to treat them as a character as well. So if you are tackling this in an existing whip or draft, then the way to do that is to introduce foil aspects into a character that is already fleshed out, or flesh out an existing foil character. One of the things I do want to point out is that foil characters in general work really well with any sort of like villain/hero, antagonist, protagonist sort of relationship, even with romances, even with characters that are not diametrically opposed in terms of the conflict and the narrative. Any sort of personal relationship or personal stake within each other's lives, that is a really good opportunity to make the foil character sort of like a high stakes element within the story beyond just their foilness, if that makes sense. And of course, before you even go into writing the foil character, you want to consider why you are foiling or highlighting this trait in the main character. I'm just going to say main character. Of course, again, it could be any character that is being foiled. What is the purpose of highlighting this trait? How does that reflect back into the theme you have established through the conflict, through the plot, hopefully? I should really make a video about themes sometime, but I digress. Think about what the ultimate conclusion of this conflict will be, because ideally there is some sort of conflict here. It's an ideological conflict. That's why the foil exists. The main character in question is either being pushed or pulled toward the foil's highlighted trait, and maybe they're being tugged in a different direction by a different foil character. Yes, it can be a trifecta. So great. There's so many ways you can do this. But you want to think about what the conclusion will be. Like, who is going to win in this ideological conflict? Who is going to have the last word? Is it going to be selfishness or selflessness? Is it going to be greed or generosity? That is where your theme comes into play. That is where you really have to think about what you're going to say with this dynamic. Another thing to think about here is that you should show and not tell your foiled traits. I feel like this is really basic advice, but you would be surprised by how much I've read that does not necessarily follow this. I think it's like a weird kind of more modern issue where people are sometimes writing people's characters traits just onto the page, just saying they are kind, like in dialogue, which I think is people's way of trying to get away with like not following show don't tell. Not that it's a rule that you have to follow, but I think in terms of personality traits and that sort of thing, it's really like kind of important to not just state it on the page unless you really have to, or it's a unique situation. I think it's so much more effective to build upon a character's traits by just having it happen, having it come into play within the narrative, having it cause things, having it have consequences. So much more effective. It gets the point across. It's a great way to show that you can write characterization, basically. And showing traits through direct action is just so much more impactful, especially if you have a diametrically opposed or like a sort of equal and opposite reaction from the main character's side. Like, for example, if the hero is saving a child from a burning building while the cowardly sort of foil turns tail and runs away, that just says so much more than just saying the hero is brave and the other character is a coward. you know. One more thing to consider is that foil traits can develop and evolve over time, and this again plays into the idea of creating arcs for foil characters. Back to the Train to Busan example, the businessman character, his actions, his selfish actions become so much worse over the course of the story. And that is because he is being pushed by this extreme situation. The film is at its core about people being pushed to extremes as well. As his selfishness worsens, it hurts more and more people. Building that escalation, having these characters, these foil characters, pushed to the brink by the conflict, by the plot, by whatever situation they're in, and getting them to sort of develop negatively while the main character maybe develops positively, or vice versa. You know, these are just very basic examples and you can play with them as you want. That is definitely, however, one of my favorite things to see when it comes to foil characters. I think this sort of opposite but equal but opposite journeys for the two characters is just incredibly effective, just really a great way to, if you use it cleverly, to just hone your theme and to make the story really memorable. But that is pretty much all I have to say about character foils for the time being. I feel like I'm not really great at explaining the basics beyond that one sentence, so if you need some further reading, I will go ahead and link some articles down below that you could check out. You can always also ask questions. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys next time.